Eleanor Hayes sat on the worn wooden porch of her small cabin in the Rocky Mountains outside Aspen, Colorado, cradling a mug of coffee that had gone cold an hour ago. At 73, her hands were still steady, but her heart felt anything but. The phone call from her grandson, Tyler, still echoed in her ears. "Grandma, I'm sorry, but I sold the cabin and your Jeep. I needed the money. My crypto investments are about to take off. Vegas is the place to network for this stuff. Don't worry, I'll pay you back tenfold. Love you." He'd hung up before she could say a word. 45 years of pouring love into that boy, raising him after his parents, her only daughter and son-in-law, died in a car crash on an icy mountain road, and he'd discarded her like an old boot. The cabin had been her husband Jack's dream, built plank by plank with his own hands after he retired from guiding hunters and fly fishermen. The Jeep was the last vehicle they'd bought together, the one Jack had driven up the rutted forest road every spring to open the cabin for summer. Eleanor didn't cry. She stared out at the snow-dusted pines and felt something shift inside her, the way the earth shifts before an avalanche. Calm, cold, certain. Because there was something Tyler didn't know. 3 days before Jack died of a sudden stroke while splitting firewood, he had pressed a thick manila envelope into her hands. "Ellie, put this in the safe behind the elk mount. Open it only when you're ready, and only if you need it." She'd tucked it away and, in the fog of grief, forgotten it existed. Until now. The next morning, Eleanor pulled the step stool from the pantry, climbed up, and reached behind the dusty elk head Jack had mounted in 1987. The small safe was still there. The combination was their wedding date. Inside lay the envelope, yellowed but intact, with her name written in Jack's careful block letters. She carried it to the kitchen table, the same pine table where she'd fed Tyler countless bowls of venison chili and helped him with algebra homework. Her fingers trembled only slightly as she opened it. Inside were deeds, bank statements, a handwritten letter. "My dearest Ellie, if you're reading this, I'm gone. I'm sorry I kept secrets, but I wanted to protect you and Tyler from gold fever. You know how I loved these mountains. Over 40 years of guiding, I bought up old mining claims nobody wanted, claims that panned out quiet-like. Then the ski resorts came. Land values went crazy. I bought more parcels, always quiet, always in a trust you now control. There are 5 luxury properties in Aspen, 3 slopeside condos, a lodge on the Roaring Fork, and a big timber frame home on Red Mountain. There's also the original gold claim up near Independence Pass that's still producing. The trust is worth more than either of us ever dreamed. I didn't want Tyler to know. He's a good boy, but he's young. Money too soon can ruin a soul quicker than whiskey. Let him earn his way first. Love him, but let him grow. All my love forever, Jack." Eleanor sat back, stunned. The numbers on the statements blurred. Millions. Many millions. She thought of Tyler's voice, so casual, so certain she had nothing left to take. She smiled for the first time in days. The following weeks passed in a strange duality. To the small town of Aspen and the nearby hamlet of Snowmass, Eleanor Hayes was the poor widow whose ungrateful grandson had sold her home out from under her. Neighbors brought casseroles. The postmistress asked gently if she needed help finding a rental. Old friends from the fly fishing club offered to drive her to the grocery store since the Jeep was gone. She accepted the casseroles. She smiled sadly. She let them believe. But in the evenings, after the sun slipped behind the peaks and the cabin grew quiet, she sat at the kitchen table with Jack's documents spread out like a map to a new life. She called Jack's old lawyer, Harlan Whitaker, in Glenwood Springs. "Mrs. Hayes," Harlan said, voice cracking with surprise when she laid out the contents of the envelope. "Jack was the quietest, wealthy man I ever met. everything is airtight. The trust owns the properties through a holding company. Tyler had no legal right to sell this cabin. It's in your name personally, not the trust. Can we get it back quietly? We can void the sale entirely. The buyers thought they were getting a steal from a desperate widow. They'll walk away happy to get their deposit back. Do it, she said. And Harlan, keep my name out of it for now. In the meantime, Tyler was in Las Vegas. He posted photos on social media, bottle service at clubs, posing beside Lamborghinis, grinning with influencers who promised him the next big token would 1000x. He texted Eleanor once, "Grandma, you'd love it here. Lights everywhere." She replied only, "Be careful, sweetheart." She meant it. Spring turned to summer. The aspen leaves shivered silver in the wind. Eleanor took the bus down to Glenwood once a week to meet Harlan. The cabin came back into her name. The Jeep was recovered from a dealership in Denver. The buyer had felt guilty when he learned the story and returned it for what he paid. Still, she said nothing. Tyler's posts grew frantic, then desperate. The crypto winter hit hard. His sure-thing tokens collapsed. He lost everything. The money from the cabin, the Jeep, and the savings he'd drained from credit cards. He started gambling to chase losses. Blackjack, poker, sports bets. Debt piled up fast. One August evening, as Eleanor sat on the porch watching a thunderstorm roll across the peaks, her phone rang. "Grandma?" Tyler's voice was small, broken. "I'm in trouble. I'm coming home. Can I stay at the cabin for a while?" "Of course," she said softly. "This will always be your home." He arrived 2 days later in a Greyhound bus, carrying one duffel bag and the hollow-eyed look of someone who'd stared into the abyss and lost. Eleanor met him at the Aspen bus stop in the old Jeep. He climbed in without a word, staring at his hands. "I messed up, Grandma. I messed up bad." "I know, honey." They drove up the winding forest road in silence. When the cabin came into view, smoke curling from the chimney, wildflowers blooming along the path, Tyler started to cry. "I sold this place. How—" "Some things have a way of coming back," she said. That night, they sat at the pine table. Tyler told her everything. The lies he'd told himself, the friends who vanished when the money did, the bookies now calling his phone. He owed nearly $200,000. Collectors were threatening him. He had no job, no degree finished, no plan. "I don't deserve your help," he said, voice cracking. "I took everything from you." Eleanor poured him tea. "Drink this. We'll figure it out tomorrow." Over the next weeks, she watched him closely. He chopped wood without being asked. He fixed the loose boards on the porch. He drove into town and took a job washing dishes at the local diner, minimum wage, tips if he was lucky. He came home exhausted, hands raw. But he came home. One evening, he found an old photo album in the attic. Pictures of his parents, of Jack teaching him to fly fish, of Eleanor holding him as a toddler on the porch swing. He sat on the floor and cried again. "I forgot who I was," he whispered when she found him there. "You're remembering now," she said. Fall painted the mountains gold. Tyler kept the dishwashing job. He started night classes online, basic accounting, something practical. He paid Eleanor $200 a month for rent, even though she tried to refuse it. "Grandma, I need to pay my way. Please." She accepted the money and quietly put it into a savings account in his name. Harlan called one October morning. "Mrs. Hayes, the last piece is in place. The holding company is fully under your control. All debts on the properties are cleared. You're free to do whatever you wish." "Thank you, Harlan. One more thing. I'd like you to prepare a meeting. It's time." Tyler had been living in the cabin for 4 months when Eleanor told him they had an appointment in Glenwood Springs. "For what?" he asked, worried. "Is it about my debts? Grandma, I'm trying." "It's time you knew the whole truth," she said. They drove down valley in the Jeep, past meadows turning brown and elk grazing in the twilight. Tyler fidgeted the entire way. Harlan Whitaker's office smelled of leather and pine cleaner. The lawyer greeted them warmly, but his eyes held the same knowing glint Eleanor remembered from Jack's funeral. "Tyler," began Harlan, sliding a thick folder across the desk, "your grandmother has asked me to explain some things." Tyler opened the folder with shaking hands. Deeds, trust documents, bank balances that made his eyes widen. This says Grandma owns half of Red Mountain, and the lodge on the river, and... He looked up at Eleanor, stunned. "You've been rich this whole time?" "Yes. And when I sold the cabin, you could have stopped me." "I could have." "You let me lose everything. You let me crawling back." "I let you find your way back." Tyler's face crumpled. "Why?" "Because love isn't just rescuing someone from the consequences of their choices. Sometimes love is letting them feel the full weight so they never forget it. Your grandfather knew that. He built all this quietly because he wanted you to grow into a man who valued hard work and family more than easy money." Tyler stared at the papers, then at her. "I treated you like trash. I took your home, your memories, everything Grandpa worked for, and I threw it away on lights and lies." "You did. And you still took me in, fed me, gave me a second chance." "I did." He started to cry, deep, wrenching sobs that shook his whole body. Eleanor moved around the desk and held him like she had when he was 5 and scared of thunderstorms. When the storm passed, Tyler wiped his face and looked at Harlan. "What happens now?" Harlan glanced at Eleanor. "That's up to your grandmother," Eleanor spoke softly. "The debts you ran up in Vegas, they're gambling debts, mostly unenforceable in Colorado if we fight them. Harlan can make them go away. The properties are safe. You never have to worry about money again if you don't want to." Tyler was quiet a long time. "I don't want that," he said finally. "I don't want to go back to who I was. I want to keep washing dishes until I finish my classes. I want to pay rent. I want to earn my way." Eleanor felt tears in her own eyes. "That's the man your grandfather always believed you could be." 6 months later, life in the cabin had found a new rhythm. Tyler finished his accounting certificate and took a job as a bookkeeper for a local outfitter. He still lived in the cabin, but now he paid half the utilities and bought groceries every week. One spring evening, as snowmelt roared in the creek below the cabin, Tyler came home with an envelope. "I got accepted," he said, grinning. "University of Colorado, business program, full ride scholarship. I applied without telling you." Eleanor hugged him tight. "I'm proud of you, Tyler." "There's something else." He grew serious. "I've been thinking about the big house on Red Mountain, the one nobody's using. What if we turned it into a place for kids who've lost parents, like I did? A place where they can come fish, hike, learn to chop wood, somewhere safe." Eleanor looked out the window at the peaks glowing pink in the sunset. "Your grandfather would love that," she said. "He always said a home isn't truly a home until it opens its doors to others." Tyler nodded. "I want to call it the Jack Hayes Refuge." That summer, they began the paperwork. Eleanor quietly funded the foundation. Tyler ran the day-to-day planning, working nights after his job. One evening in July, they drove up to the Red Mountain house together. It was a grand timber frame beauty with views clear to the Continental Divide. Tyler stood on the wide deck and took a deep breath. "I almost lost all this," he said. "I almost lost you." "But you didn't," Eleanor replied. He turned to her. "Grandma, I need to say it properly. I'm sorry for everything I did, for who I became." "I forgave you a long time ago, sweetheart." "I know, but I won't ever take that forgiveness for granted again." They stood in silence as the sun dipped behind the mountains, painting the sky and fire and gold. Later, back at the cabin, Eleanor sat on the porch with a cup of tea. She looked up at the stars, millions of them, bright and close in the thin mountain air. Jack's voice seemed to whisper on the wind. "You did good, Ellie. Our boy's home." She smiled. "Yes, love, he's finally home."